fashion lovers, welcome again to another interesting video tutorial. In case you're new here, my name is Gift and I hope you have subscribed already. And if you're an old subscriber, thank you also for always tuning in. In today's video, I'll be showing us how to draft the patterns needed in order to create this beautiful jacket that we have here. If this is something you like to see, then let's get started. First, on the table, I have my pattern paper all laid out, and on the upper part, I left about 7 inches, and on the center front area, I left about 3 to 3.5 inches allowance before drafting my main bodies, and I expect that by now we should be able to draft a basic bodies. And if you do not know how to do that, I will leave a link on how to draft a basic bodies, but I will be going through that just to explain to the beginners here. So here I have my shoulder line, and from that point I drew out my chest line. I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, which is what we have there. I'm also using a basic neckline. I'm using a 3.5 by 3.5 inches neck depth and neck width respectively. Okay, so that's the basic neck width I'm using. The next thing here is my shoulder to bust point. So you want to go in and impute your shoulder to bust point. Mine is 11. Then you want to impute your shoulder to waistline. So the front length or the waistline measurement is 18 inches for my client, and here I have 27 inches, which is the length of the jacket. I also mistakenly drafted this side dart, which I will not be using for this pattern. Okay, now for the armhole area, you want to divide what you have from your shoulder tip to your chest line into 2. Measure what you have there, divide it into 2 equal halves like so. Okay, and go in from there by 0.75 in order to create your armhole curve. Okay, on the chest line, impute your bust measurement divided by 4. Okay, good. Now remember, we have that allowance there, which is necessary for our lapel. It's a shawl color jacket. Okay, so now that you have done that, the next thing you also want to do is to divide your bust span measurement into 2. Mine is 9 inches divided by 2. Impute whatever you get all the way from your bust point down to your hip line like so, and then connect it with a straight line. Okay, now after doing that, you want to come down from your bust point by 1 inch just to avoid a sharp point around that area. Okay, now from the hip line, you also want to go up by 2 inches. 2 inches. Now this will serve as a break point for your dart. That is where your dart is going to stop. On my waist, I took out 1 inch dart, ½ inch on both sides, as you can see, and that is what I'm explaining there. Now go in and rule in your lines for the dart. You know how to rule the lines for your dart. So connect that to your hip line. Make sure the dart does not get to your hip line. You have to go up by 2 inches. Okay, so on the waistline, impute your waist circumference divided by 4, and that is what I have there. Mine is 10.5 inches, and also add the 1 inch dart intake. Remember, we'll be taking out that dart, so add that intake back so that you do not have shortage on your waistline. Okay, on your hip line, impute your hip circumference divided by 4. Remember, there is no dart on the hip, so you're just going to connect that with a smooth curve. Now back to the back pattern. The back pattern is the same thing with the front, except that there are 1 or 2 modifications. First is on the neckline. The neckline is 3.5 inches wide and 1 inch depth. Remember, the front was 3.5 inches depth, but here deep rather. But here we are using 1 inch depth. Then on the chest line for the back, you have to come down by 1 inch. On the hip line, go up by 2 inches. Okay, but for the front pattern, we came down by 1 inch on the bust point, but here we are going to come down by 1 inch on the chest line. Do the same thing for your dart intake. Okay, then for your shoulder line, measure what you have there from the shoulder tip to your by 0.75. You're going to leave that part straight and then connect this other point to your bust line just the same way I'm doing in this video. Okay, so after you have gotten that, you also want to impute your bust measurement. Of course, you need that in order to create your chest, the armhole curve. Okay, now on the back part, which is the center back, I'm going to be doing some other modification, but now before then, let's go to the front part. Now I want to impute my lapel area, but first I will be imputing my button allowance. So you can make use of 1 inch for your button allowance or 1.5 inches. Mine is 1 inch, and I'm taking that 1 inch mark all the way from my neck depth down to the end of the jacket. Okay, I'm also connecting that with a straight line like so. I'm going in with my marker pen just to make those lines more visible for you to see. Go ahead and label that as your button allowance. Okay, cool. The next thing you want to do is to determine your break point. The break point is where the collar is going to end, okay, or where it's going to start from, depending. So mine, I'm going up by 1 inch from my waistline. You can do 2 inches below your underbust or 1 inch above your waistline, and that is what I just did here. And this is going to be my break point. As you can see, I extended that line to the other side. Now the next thing you will do is to connect the break point to your shoulder, to your neckline area like so. That is where the shoulder tip is starting from. So connect it like so, and make sure you extend the line a bit. I will be explaining why why you need to extend the line. So after you have connected that, you make sure that you still put into consideration the amount of neck depth, I mean the neck width you measured for your back. Mine is 3.5 inches. Please take note of that. Then go ahead and impute the 3.5 inches on that extended line like so. Now you need to be sure that this is accurate, okay? Remember, we use the same neck width for both the front and back. It was the neck depth that was different. So I imputed a 3.5 inches neck width for my back like so. And then from that point, I'm just cross-checking to be sure. From that point, come out by 0.5 inch and then connect that part with a straight line. Okay, this part we are constructing is just so the back collar sits properly on the neck area. Connect it to the curve to meet up with that line like so. After you have done this, of course, the next thing you want to impute is the width of your collar, okay? Now, the width of your collar depends on you. Mine, I'm making use of 3.5 inches, like so. As you can see, is 3.5 inches from that first line, okay? So I'm imputing that like so, and then when connecting these lines, make sure it is not a straight line. It is a diagonal line. Make sure it is not a straight line. Make sure it is 45 degree, is a 45-degree line. For those of us that have a master pattern, you will understand what a 45-degree line. Make sure it is diagonal that way, okay? And please cross check to be sure that you do not have more than the neck width we intend to use, but mine I'm making use of 3.5. I don't want it to be too big. So now with my free hand, I'm just connecting or freestyling the shape of my collar, okay? Please go ahead and do whatever color you feel it's okay for you. For me, I'm just going in with my pencil like so, just to draw in the color, okay? And as you can see, I'm just erasing and redrawing until I get what I feel I'm okay with. Please do well to repeat the same process for yours, okay? Next thing, I went in with my curved ruler just to make those lines more beautiful and more visible for you to see, okay? Cool. Now, by the time you are done with this part, this is just basically all for the upper part of the front, okay? And this is our shawl collar. This is our shawl collar. Now, the next thing I want to do is to connect my break point to the hem of my jacket like so. For me, I do not want to leave it straight. You can leave yours straight, but I don't want to leave mine straight. So I'm just connecting a straight line from my break point to somewhere around that point. It's not getting to the entire hem because I want to give you some kind of curvy effect around that area, okay? So in order to achieve that, I will go in with my curved ruler just to give it that beautiful curve that I want around that point, okay? Cool. Now that you are done with this, the next thing you want to do is to go up from the side front by 0.75 inch and then connect that to the straight line to that point like so. The reason why I'm also doing this is so that it has some kind of beautiful curve around that area. Now guys, we are basically done with this front part. The next thing I'm doing is to go in with my marker pen just to make those lines bolder and more visible for you to see. Cool. The next thing you want to do is to impute your seam allowances. On the side front, I'm imputing 1-inch seam allowance, while for the other parts, I will be imputing half-inch seam allowance round, except for the armhole area for the front. Okay, so I have half-inch seam allowance round like so, 1 inch on the side front, but I did not add any seam allowance to the armhole area. This I will be doing on my fabric directly. Go ahead and label your patterns, and guys, that is basically all for the front. So guys, if you have not subscribed, please do where to subscribe to this channel. I hope this tutorial is getting more interesting. Okay, so now we are done with the front, then let's move to the back. Now for the back pattern, there is really not much work to do, except that I'll be doing this modification on the center back of the back. Now this back is too straight for a real human being. So in order to give it the spinal look the backs of humans have, I'm going to be going in from the waistline by half of an inch and then connect that line to my neckline with a straight line like so. Go in from your waistline by half of an inch, connect it to your neckline with that straight line, and then connect it to the curve to your hip line. Okay, make sure this is not too sharp. And then on the hemline, I also want to go up. I went up rather by 0.75. Remember, that was the same measurement we took out on the side front. So on the side back, I'll go up by 0.75 like so, and then connect that with a straight line to the hemline of the back like so. Cool. So the next thing you want to do is to go ahead and add your seam allowances round. For the side back, I will be adding 1-inch seam allowance, just the same way we did for the front. On the neckline, I will not be adding any seam allowance, and I will not be adding any seam allowance to the armhole area as well. So I just decided to show us what the seam allowance for the center back is going to look like, 1/2 inch. I'm going to be joining that by the time I transfer to fabric. So go ahead and add your seam allowances around. So guys, after adding the seam allowances, this is what I have. So I have 1/2 inch like so, 1/2 inch round, except for the side back. The side back has a 1-inch seam allowance, and the armhole area does not have any seam allowance whatsoever for now. The neckline too does not have any seam allowance whatsoever, guys. So now the next thing I want to do is to divide my shoulder line into 2, because I want this jacket to have a shoulder dart. Okay, so I'll be dividing what I have there by 2, and then I'll be connecting that straight up with the dart on my chest line like so. So at this point, you could decide to slash through your pattern, or you could also decide to leave it this way. For me, I'll be slashing through my patterns. Okay, now the next thing I'll also do is to repeat the same process for the front part. I'm going to be dividing the shoulder line into 2 like so, and then connect it with a straight line to meet up with the dart on my bust point. Make sure it is not too sharp, guys. Make sure it is not too sharp. So I'm going to connect those lines like so. Can you see? And then that is all. So like I said, you could leave yours this way, or you could cut out. So I'll be showing us how to cut out. So I'll go in with my scissors and just cut out those patterns like so. Please cut on your seam allowance, okay? And for the back, this is what we have after cutting out. You can leave it like this, like I said before, but I'm going to be slashing through my... So if you want to slash through yours, you can just follow this process. I'm going to be slashing through the dart line like so. I will take out the dart all the way to the shoulder line. I will also take out the dart on this other part. As you can see, this is what we have. So by the time I transfer to fabric, I'm going to just be adding 1/2 inch to those parts. And for the front, I also repeated the same thing. I slashed all the way like so, took out the dart, and this is what we have. Okay, cool. So guys, now to the front, to the center front. I decided to show us this on the sides, on the backs rather. So by the time you're transferring to fabric, I'm going to be adding ½ inch seam allowance to my armhole area, ½ inch to my neckline, and ½ inch to join those 2 points together. The same thing, I'll be adding ½ inch to this part to join them together, ½ inch to my armhole area, guys. So I'll be cutting two pieces for this part, two piece of fabric for this part of the pattern paper. While for the center front, I'm going to be making use of a separate fabric because I do not want to use the same fabric. I will be using a doll face bridal satin for the front part, so I will just be cutting out 2 pieces of the doll face bridal satin just so I can have the different pattern that I have on the video I showed up before starting this tutorial. So guys, in my next video, I'll be showing us how to transfer this to fabric and also how to sew. Give this video a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe if you have not, share our video if this has been helpful. Till I meet you again, I'm Gift. Have a nice day. Bye.